Did you think that the government would just give people money and that was the end of it? Of course not. Taxes will be increased in order to pay for it. But don't worry, because the big corporations will pay higher taxes to protect the little guy. Like how the countless big corporations pay little to no taxes, but that doesn't really matter because as long as the government tells you that they're in control, perception is all that counts. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. I know it's hard to hear it, but that's what's happening. You look at the Googles and all the other big corporations out there. I've done many videos about them. They paid 3% tax and they paid 0% tax and they paid 5% tax. And they say, you know what, we're going to increase taxes on the rich. We're going to increase taxes on the wealthy. And then the next year comes around and Google's paying 3% tax again. And, all these different companies, they pay such little taxation. Why? Because they have the best people in the world figuring out how to work the system and make it so. They lobby the right people in government. They start going in and out with the revolving door to make it all happen. People are simply waiting for the government to come in and say, we're going to increase the taxation, but they don't even realize the people that they are trying to get to actually change the system used to work for Goldman Sachs. They used to work for Monsanto and all these other companies. And so you're trying to change a system by going to the very people who likely have been working or being lobbied by these institutions. The government is simply just an arm, if you will, or a mechanism that's being used to get their deals done. A lot of people don't realize that, but that's the way it works. Of course, I need to go into that more in a separate video. I'm going on too long already. Now, I want to cover a lot of information today. No more wasting time. Let's go. Starting with the stock market, you've seen it go up in basically a straight line. I mean, there's I wouldn't even call it a correction in the market that happened, but of course that was forgotten very fast. Morgan Stanley's Mike Wilson has said, I think it's time that we take a little bit off the top here and we start to redeploy into some other areas. Mike Wilson stands quite alone right now in relation to many of the other big banks who have just shown you that the market is never going to go down because the Federal Reserve loves you and they tuck you into bed at night. Do you want to know why the sun comes up in the morning? It's the Federal Reserve. It's the central banks. You want to know why the sun goes down in the evening? Take a guess. It's because of the Federal Reserve. It's because of the central banks. Foreign holdings of treasuries rise in January as yields rise, luring investors in. And this is important to note because you can see the exchange rate affecting a lot of different things, not just what's happening with the treasuries, but you can see that with the imports and the exports too. It's not going to necessarily change month to month that much, but if there's a trend whereby, for instance, the dollar is strengthening over a period of several months, now these governments, now these institutions, they go in and start looking for places to park their money. And this happens to be one that is massive. Of course, you look around the world and there's no other supposed safe haven other than treasuries. At least that's the way the investment community sees it. This right here is the major foreign holders of Treasury securities page. And whenever you want to see the exact documentation of what's happening right now with the major foreign holders, you just do the search right here, major foreign holders of Treasury securities. That brings you to the treasury.gov website. I get criticized every single time. Why am I showing the old data? It's March right now and we need to see this. Anyway, January 2021, but if you look at the actual date down here, I know the font is small, March 15th, 2021. So this is the most recent information, but of course it's delayed. The point here is that you can look through and see who's buying, who's selling. In fact, right now, China did increase, but the trend overall for China has been down. We'll see if that trend continues. And largely, we have noticed that Japan has been buying up a lot of treasuries over the last couple months. We'll see as well if that continues. I've covered this many times before. Let's move on. I found this to be interesting, coming directly from the BEA's own website, and they break down the GDP by industry. So if you want to check this out, it is something to scroll through on occasion. You can go through these type of websites, once a quarter, once every year, whatever you want to do, just to keep a little bit of tabs on not just what the GDP growth is, but you want to see it by sector. Okay, so I took a scroll through and I just noticed something that, I'm sure you would be aware of, but I wanted to make it clear how to use this essentially. And this is in the billions of dollars. Transportation and warehousing. So you're getting 2018, 2019, and 2020 up until the third quarter. And you can look through there and you will see something very distinct. In the second quarter of this time frame, it had come down significantly from the previous years. Now that improved in the third quarter of 2020. But one thing that was down and hard hit is definitely transportation, specifically air transportation. So we're going from, 230, 250, what have you, and then it's down to 47 in the second quarter. And you could see that it does come up in the third quarter to 74. So we'll see probably an increase there, especially as we have noted most recently with the amount of travelers. You will notice that these numbers are going to climb. So maybe the fourth quarter might be something like 90, and then the first quarter 2021 is even higher, and so on. So that might be a rebound. I am definitely seeing the air industry rebound somewhat, and that is very clear. Of course, that's a positive sign. But we're noticing still that the actual costs here of all shipments are still extremely high. So if you're doing air shipping overseas, you might still be noticing the fact that it is very, very expensive because there's just not enough planes. So this might happen to be the US, but not all planes, of course, are going to be necessarily with this one country. So you need to look at it more accurately depending on where you're moving product in and out from. Nordia put out this report and I thought it was so good. If you want some chart GPS kind of deal, you're going to want to look at this one. Time for J. Powell's taper tantrum. And we'll see what happens. They've been talking about the liquidity ratio and so on, the leverage ratios and everything that is included here. I think it's important to note where people believe that the Federal Reserve will be going. Are they going to increase interest rates? Of course not. That's not going to happen. They love us and so on. But they have many other things along the way. Now, specifically the reserve ratios are going to be kept at zero for the banks. That's what they expect. So we'll see what happens. There's so many charts in here. I really don't have time to get into them all, but this one, the global manufacturing cycle, looks peakish. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but it is something that I brought up in a previous video with the China credit impulse. That happens to lead what we see in the general economy around the world. The same patterns occurred many times before. And so you could see it here on the chart, but that had already started to tip downward. Is that necessarily going to happen today? Only time will tell. There's a lot in this article talking about how people were affected by the situation 2020, depending on their education level and so on. But the one point that I wanted to make from this is that at the very bottom, men whose highest degree was a professional degree had median earnings of $136,000 in 2019, and then it goes on. But what I was thinking here is that you've got people who are making excellent salaries, and they still have trouble affording the average house in many cities. So somebody who's earning $136,000, maybe their spouse is also earning a great salary. When you see these people and their actual financials, sometimes it is very frightening. I have seen this. I have heard about this, and many people have told me through their experiences, through people that they know and so on, about individuals who at least one person of the family is considered to be, a big earner, and they are still unable to actually make ends meet realistically because they spend so much money. A lot of that is just bad management, but at the same time, there's there's just such great expenses that people take on. Their mortgages, their, the increasing expenses on everything from utilities to food and so on. Healthcare, for those who are paying for their healthcare, have such a great expense that continues to increase every year. So this is what I'm seeing. It's that no matter what level you are at, the expenses are going up higher than the salaries. I've got a few articles here and charts to pull up and talk about, but I'm sure you've already seen this in the news. They're planning on putting in the first major federal tax hike since 1993 to help pay for the long-term economic program designed as a follow-up to the relief bill. So there's so much already pumped into the system, but that's not enough. So how do you pay for that? Well, it's pretty obvious. You increase taxes, but don't worry, because the little guy is not going to pay the increased taxes. No. They're going to increase the corporate tax rate. So it was brought down a few years ago. They're planning on increasing that, and the individual rate for high earners. I believe maybe I have that article up. If not, anyway, they were saying something like $400,000 and above. These are the people that are making 400K. Okay, already they're getting that slashed down to what? 200K? I guess depends on where you live. 200K. So it's not really 400K, it's 200K. And you can make an excuse that that's a high income individual. But of course, you look at it much more clearly and you see that these type of people aren't the ones that we should be focusing on. It's the Googles, it's the Facebooks and all of these that are able to manipulate the system itself. So the guy down the street that has the BMW isn't the problem. It's the fact that you've got a revolving door in the government that will never change. It's always like this, and the system itself is rotten to the core. This is just a chart that corresponds. Federal U.S. revenues have trended lower since the 1990s. U.S. federal budget total receipts as a percentage of the GDP that has been coming down, as you can see. I just wanted to note this and move on. They made some important points here in this Bloomberg article that I really need to touch on, because this is the key. For now, it appears that the middle class families will be spared a direct tax increase. Sure, we'll see what happens. The plan, of course, to go from 21 to 28%, we will see, because this has an effect on the middle and in lower income individuals. Raising the corporate tax rate has in many ways a broad economic impact. It doesn't distinguish between the large and the small corporations. There could be one person in a corporation. I don't think they realize this. It could literally be just one person. They have a corporation to protect from liability, but it's not necessarily what they think, that, okay, it's a corporation. That sounds big. Taxes on corporations might reduce the amount that they can contribute to mutual funds, pension fund holders, and employee stock plans, as well as how much they pay employees. There's more to it than that, of course, but I just wanted to make that distinction right now. And in some absolutely ridiculous news, your favorite and mine, Janet Yellen proposing global minimum tax on multinationals. What do we do when these companies go overseas to protect themselves from these, high taxation? Oh, that's right. We're going to work together in global governance to make sure every company pays their fair share. This, to me, is more worrisome than the money that they're supposedly going to be bringing in. The fact that these governments continuously are becoming more and more synchronized is very worrisome. That's all for this video. If you found that informative, hit that thumbs up button. When you do, you're supporting me. I want to thank you for that. Simply by clicking a button on your screen, you help to support the creator. That's what I wanted to follow up with here, because, when we look at what's happening with all of the different industries that are growing right now, e-commerce is so important. That's why I created this course. I created the Amazon GPS specifically to help my subscribers. It's free. It's free for you. And, we're getting closer and closer to that 10,000 mark, 10,000 people almost in this course. So we'll see what happens. Check it out, the AmazonGPS.com. If you want to learn about the financial system, everything you need to know, everything is in these two books. So check it out at the link in the description. And if you have not seen this video yet, you definitely want to click it, and I'll see you there.